All right. Hey, Facebook. We are live and we are on time, and I'm glad that we're able to do this. I know we tried to do this a couple of weeks ago, but we're back, and I am joined by my good friend and colleague Lisa Giruzzi. Hey, Lisa.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fantastic. And you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. We'll give this a little bit of time for people to log on because I know people take a minute or two to log on to Facebook Live and realize that we are here. If you are live and you are watching us, please do press the like or love button. You can press the hate button if you like, but you'll get banned. No, you won't. And leave us a little comment. Let us know that you are watching us and you are live. That would be really, really helpful. We want to make this, as always, an interactive session. So if you do have any questions, that would be great for either Lisa or myself. If there should be a little Ecamm live link. If you click on that, it gives Ecamm, you give them permission to see your name. So that really does help me out. So I don't need to alt tab between the two different browsers, because I can see someone said hello and it's Chris Stoner. Hey, Chris. But if you could do that, that would be really helpful. And today we're going to cover anything you guys want, but the working title is Transitioning to Working with the Principles, because when I started coaching, I pretty much started with the principles. I'd done lots of personal development work, but I pretty much started with the principles, whereas Lisa's got a very different background to me, and we'll have her introduce herself. But that's going to be the topic of discussion today, and I think this might be really interesting for some coaches in our group who have used other modalities and are interested in, well, what's this 3P stuff about? How do you work with clients with this? What's different about this? What do I leave? What do I take? So let's maybe start with a little bit of an introduction. I know you as someone who I met through Steve Chandler School, but and I know you've got an incredible background, but why don't you let the group know a little bit about your professional background?
Okay. So I started my professional career in the world of social work, working with people who are addicted, working with young people, children and families, and got very discouraged very early on that a lot of what I had learned didn't translate into action or didn't seem to be making a difference. And through the course of doing that work, I was just very frustrated. And coincidentally, a friend of mine had introduced me to something that she said really helped her a lot. And that was my first experience with coaching. And that was way back in 1993. And I was hooked from the get-go. Like, it was so powerful. It made such a difference in my life. I began training with them to become a coach. I did a number of programs, ended up working for the company. So I've been basically coaching since around 1994, primarily at that time working with a company as a coach for them. And then in 1998, I took a different job full-time, and I had a part-time coaching practice. It was pretty small, but it was something I was really interested in pursuing. And then in 2003, I made the leap and I left my full-time job and I became a coach/consultant because I was doing both one-on-one work and I was also working with organizations at that time I was doing a lot of organizational change work using a methodology known as appreciative inquiry. And that was amazing, just amazing stuff. And then, like you, I was so interested in professional and personal development that I was kind of a constant learner, and had a lot of experience with different teachers, some coaches, Mostly the coaches I worked with at that time were to help me build my business, marketing coaches. I was very interested in becoming a speaker, so I worked with a coach to help me do that. I was already a very good speaker, but I didn't know how to get business as a speaker. So this particular coach helped me with that. So I did a lot of speaking around the country. I'm from the United States, so I did a lot of speaking around the United States. And I had written a couple books. I've written, co-authored two. I've written two on my own. And about a year and a half ago, I was in a program, with some other graduates from Steve's program. And, I was handed, Mara Gleason's book, One Thought Changes Everything. And, that was all over for me. I couldn't read it fast enough. I was like, I think I've been looking for this my whole life. And that's how I got introduced to the principles, like I said, about a year and a half ago. And then a year ago, I did Super Coach Academy with Michael Neal. My husband and I did it together. And it's been all principles since then. Just had a lot of programs in the last year to just immerse myself in the principles so I don't know. Is that, you want to know more than that?
Well, I want to pull some stuff out because I think you're being very, very modest, and I want to kind of set the tone a little bit for the people that are watching and the people that are watching the replay. So, there are so many coaches out there, so many coaches who are trying to coach and trying to make their way. Am I allowed to say the names of the companies you work with?
Sure.
Yeah, so you start off with a Landmark. I believe you became a Landmark seminar leader and went very high up in that organization. You've worked with Werner Erhard on an 8-day school or something he does for a small group.
Yeah.
Around integrity, and I know I've interviewed you previously on my personal page as a Facebook wall about integrity. You can check that out. It's really cool. Couple of interviews we did a few years ago, and you've really worked, with a lot of corporates, I believe,
yeah.
and made, it's all relative, but good money. You were making a full-time living off coaching. So, you're not someone who was, and I want to kind of set the scene here. You're not someone who's been a very new coach, who's not really done a lot, not had a lot of clients. You were someone who really had quite a thriving coaching practice before you came across the principles.
Yeah,
Would that
it
be
was
fair
kind
to
of
say?
the last thing. It was like the last thing I needed in a certain way when I, was introduced to the principles in the way that I was. Obviously I'd heard about them before because I knew you before then, and I sort of knew about them and had no understanding at all. It really didn't mean a lot to me, other than I knew it was what you did and a couple other people I knew. But how I was listening to it back then it was sort of another version of what I was doing. Like I didn't see what it really was. So I was by most standards, financially very successful, as well as had a full coaching practice. I've worked with CEOs and owners of companies and, organizations, whole organizations. The largest one I worked with was about 170 people. Although I did one project that was over 300 people. So, I've had a full-time business for 15 and a half years. And so, I wasn't dabbling. This was my full-time profession. And although I did speaking and training and, fundamentally it was all coming from the place of being a coach. And I've always had, a number of coaching clients, even when I was on the road speaking a lot. I've just done a lot of different things, as well as studied with Byron Katie. I didn't do the 9-day school, but I did a 4-day immersion with her. I did work with Werner. And for me, it was, how do I help my clients more? That was myself. It wasn't altruistic. It was, how do I help myself and how do I help my clients more? How do I, discover what is going to have people not only see this, but be able to live from it, whatever it was that I was teaching.
So I'm going to ask some very pointed questions, if that's okay. And I like these conversations to be as honest and open as possible, because I think that's when it's the most helpful. So we have a bunch of coaches in here who may have trained in something else, and they kind of like, I have two different kinds of people that join this. There's one that's a coach or training to be a coach, and they're very much coming from a 3P approach. And the other kind is, they're coaches, but they're like, well, we've heard of these 3 principles. We want to know more about it. What's going on? So, for that audience, for that group potentially, how was it for you to have, had this vast background and knowledge on appreciative inquiry, on Landmark and Werner Erhard, on Byron Katie, and everything else you've done, and then come to the principles? Did you find it easy to integrate? Was it challenging? How did that happen? Tell us some more about that.
Oh, I wish I could answer. I mean, in some ways, it was very difficult because I felt like I had a foot in each camp. All the stuff I knew before, and my philosophy that I got, with everything I had learned, was to listen to the client and offer whatever was going to be helpful. And for sometimes it was strengths-based and appreciative inquiry, and other times it was more of a integrity, accountability. I was very open to doing what was going to be helpful to the client. But the thing that was difficult for me was I had developed a bunch of processes, things that I taught people about how to think differently, how to not be a prisoner of their thoughts, things like that. I had developed a bunch of stuff. And so, I learned the principles and I was like, what? Like, I don't need any of that. And it was good news, bad news. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, because it was freeing. It was, I just didn't feel it, I would never have described myself as exhausted before, but it felt like I was no longer exhausted, or I wasn't like on alert all the time. I wasn't like, oh, don't have that thought, or trying to overcome a lot of things, and again, if you knew me then, I was very happy. I was, it wasn't like my life was crap and, suddenly found the principles. It wasn't like that at all. I mean, great. Had 4 of the best financial years I had ever had, and more to come, and lots of business coming my way, and very happy in my marriage, very good family. All the things in life were working, but there was underneath that a sense of needing to hold it, like sort of have my hands around it all the time, have my attention on it. Is that making sense? So to answer your question, it was being willing to let that go. All these things I had developed to just, understand how life works. It's like, oh, life works this way. You don't need those things. But I suppose if there was an analogy, it's like when you go from riding a bike with training wheels and taking them off, it's frightening because, the training, you've relied on those training wheels. And for me, the processes that I had developed, even the books I had written, were teaching people how to cope with life, how to make their lives better using these techniques and strategies and things like that. So initially it was very difficult. But I mean, over the last year, especially, I think there's some things that have softened for me. It's not that I don't teach the processes anymore, but what I do is I listen deeply and I still offer whatever's there that, is needed, if that makes sense. Like what occurs to me to say, like the wisdom comes through as to what to say. And, sometimes it might have a strength or something else, a Byron Katie sort of twist, but it's not in opposition to the principles, or it's not offering someone something that's, like between them and how they can live life. It's more, I've just relaxed a little bit more about it and trusted that all of what I've learned is helpful, in some way.
I was just going to ask you that in terms of, is it a case of you kind of did all this other stuff and then you came to the principles and it's like, right, you need none of that, and now you just show up and let wisdom guide you? Or has there been some stuff that you've learned before that has been useful to you that you haven't completely thrown away?
Many, many, many things that I haven't thrown away. I think initially the urge was to just throw it all away. And I think that was what was making it hard, was, the principles aren't a thing. They're just the guide to reality. So, if you understand that, there are things that come in handy, there are still, like, we still have to eat, for example. We still have to cook. We still have to do things. None of those are in opposition to the principles. And that's what I began to learn, was that there were some things I did. For example, I had a model that I taught, called data versus assessment. And fundamentally what it was about was, what are the facts in life? What's the actual data? And then having people see that they had an interpretation, right? And that was incredibly valuable to people, because many, many people didn't recognize that their thoughts, there was an interpretation of reality. And then I had a whole bunch of questions that would help people to sort of unravel that. Well, what I've realized since then is that's just not necessary. It's just not necessary to have people do that. When people see that their thoughts are transient, they don't need a worksheet. You know what I mean? So that process I just don't teach anymore. But doesn't mean that the helping people see the facts of a situation isn't sometimes helpful. Like what's really happening and how much of their life is not dealing with what's actually happening in the physical world. They're actually living in, their thoughts about that. And so, again, I don't know if I'm saying it well. So there's like a nugget of it that still can be very, very helpful to people. And it's so, I don't have to be trying to be some kind of purist about it, but really just sort of relaxing and understanding that my only job as a coach is to help the person in front of me. And, whatever, I just really work to be open to, I shouldn't say work to, but I just really want to be available to help them. And if something comes up from something I've learned, I'll share that experience that I had, as opposed to sharing some tool that they can now go use.
So we've got coaches here who may be a lot newer. They don't have the experience that you have. Knowing what you know now, so having had all this experience with all these other different modalities and methods and systems, what would you say to a newer coach? Do they need to do that? Do they need to, is it not necessary? They just go and look at the principles? Is there some combination? What would you say to them?
I don't know. It's difficult to say, because I met people when I was in Super Coach Academy who had no background in anything else, who are quite good coaches, and are expanding their understanding of the principles, maybe using other teachers in the principles, and have not worked with anything else. And in my case, sometimes I wish I learned about the principles 20 years ago. But then I think, well, I wasn't ready for them because it certainly was around. It's not like it wasn't around, 20 years ago. And so, I think you have to follow your own wisdom in that way. And I guess here's something that I've discovered a lot, and you actually helped me with this too, is it's so easy to come from a place of fear and to think, oh, I got to learn this, or I got to learn that, or I got to, get this certification, and all that. And there's nothing wrong with learning those things, except that you can't solve a feeling. There's no amount of learning that's going to alter that thinking. If you're relating to your thinking like it's real, it's a thought that you're having that you need this certification or that certification. But if you have a genuine desire, like I have a genuine desire to work with Dickon Bettinger at some point, like not that I think, oh, I have to in order to get to the next level of coaching. There's something about him that appeals to me, and I have an intention to work with him. But that's like it feels like a guy, my inner wisdom kind of pointing in that direction versus needing that, to put in my tool belt and be like, oh, now I'm a good coach. Does that make sense? So I guess what I would tell people is to slow down and follow their curiosity. If you're curious about Byron Katie, or you're curious about, what Werner Erhard is up to these days, this leadership program, or you're curious about a particular teacher and the principles, follow your curiosity versus trying to, solve a problem that doesn't exist.
So one of the things that, well, first of all, this is great, and the time is flying by already. If you've got questions for Lisa or myself, please use the chat box below, and we'll try and get through, as we always do, as many of them as we can. And I say this every time, please bring your questions early, because otherwise, as we get to the end, we run out of time on how many questions we can get through. So if you've got anything for Lisa or myself, please use this opportunity to ask. One of the topics that I find is kind of hotly debated in this group, Lisa, is the idea of coaching skills. So, and I don't know if I've made this up, but there seems to be one school of thought which is all you need is grounding, and if you're grounded enough, that's all you need. That's kind of the whole shooting range, whatever. That's everything. And then there's the other piece, which I guess I lean a little bit more towards, which is, well, there's this place for coaching skills, and there's a place, for experience, and this is very much a profession, and it's not just grounding. And I remember I interviewed Jamie Smart for this group, and he said, look, if you wanted to teach someone how to drive a car, you wouldn't give them a set of car keys and a bunch of Sid Banks books, right? Which I kind of like, but it's always hotly debated, and we don't need to have the right answer. But I'm just curious what your take on that is, having been someone who's done so many other things and now come to the principles.
Well, I do think coaching is a profession, and it is something that I think takes time to master. There are people who, have helped people in their life and then think, oh, I'm going to be a coach. And I think that that's good. I mean, that's a good start, but there is a lot more to coaching than offering advice. As a matter of fact, I don't offer advice ever, right? And I think that I really do think it's a combination of two. I don't think it's one or the other. And I can tell you from my own experience over this last year of, when I started Super Coach Academy, for example, practice was full. And I was transitioning from sort of the way I had worked with people. Some of the people I was working with had been with me for a while, and they were transitioning with me. And when I finished, I was gung ho and all of that stuff, my coaching practice plummeted at one point. I had no new clients, and I was like, what has happened? And it seemed like the more I focused on my grounding and understanding, I had lost sight of the things that had worked for me. So I'm not saying this for anybody else, but the things that had worked for me in building my practice. And so since then, since discovering that I had a lot of attention on me and not the attention on serving people, having conversations with people and being curious about other people and how could I help them, I had lost that somewhere. I feel like I had solely focused on grounding and maybe that's not true, but I think there was an unequal balance. And now, having built my practice back up from that place of, no clients, which I hadn't been in a long time, and thinking what's wrong? Why is this happening? So for me, I didn't throw the principles out, and I didn't, suddenly stop working on my grounding or my understanding. But what I did was started balancing that out and realizing, a coach without client, a coach. I learned that from Steve Chandler a long time ago. And so I looked for ways to coach people and to serve people and to, help people, because you got to work in the world that people are in my opinion. Not everybody believes that, but I think you have to work in the world people are in. And so, people come to me and they want to build their business, or, I have a executive that I'm working with and they want to grow themselves as a leader. That's what we're working on. I may never mention the word 3 principles ever. That's not, they don't care. They want to know, can I help them? And so that's what I focus on, is how can I help them? And, with my grounding and my understanding of how life works and using it as a guide to reality, how can I help this person? So I personally think it's not either or, but I may be wrong. I'm just saying from my own experience over this last year. And the other thing I think that makes a good coach, or how you're a good coach, is that you have satisfied clients. And, that's where I look. Not from, that felt good to me, that's nice, but doesn't matter. Is how was it for the person? Do I have satisfied clients? Do I have clients who are producing the results they want to produce in the world, whatever that may be? So, does that answer your question?
So I love that, and I'm going to play devil's advocate. What would you say to someone who, and we get people say this in this group, what would you say to someone who says, well, you can't impact someone's level of satisfaction because they will feel what they feel given their thinking in the moment? So what would you say to someone around that?
So you mean if someone says, like I said, I look to see are my clients satisfied? Well,
I'm giving you all the difficult questions today.
I don't know about you, but I don't have enough time to really think about it. I get that, but I get that. And if a client hires me, or when a client hires me, because there's no way if they hire me and they say, I want to achieve X. I don't guarantee that they're going to achieve X. I can't. That's not my job, right? However, and I still work with people weekly or biweekly over a period of time, and so if they're not moving towards what they want, or sometimes they decide, oh, I don't want that anymore. Now I want this. This is what I really want. For me, if they leave and they're not satisfied, or their thinking is this sucked, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be in business that long, so I don't know how to answer that question. I understand that, on a certain level, they're not satisfied because it's a function of their thinking. So I don't know. I have to think about that more. But for me, it's, am I to this person? Am I moving this person in the direction they want to go? Or it's not that I'm moving them, but they're discovering whatever they're discovering that's moving them in that direction. I feel like I'm rambling.
No, that's okay. It's I agree with you. I find that, I don't know if this is the right words, but I find it, by saying, well, people are just feeling their thinking all the time, it can be a little bit of a cop out, and ultimately, I think you're right that when, if you have a lot of satisfied clients, that's kind of a really good indication if you're kind of doing things right. And I know there was a question in this group recently around getting referrals, and a number of people said, well, impact people enough. So Melissa Ford, who we both know, Johnny Bowden, who we both know, commented and said, well, when you impact people enough, when they have a significant amount of transformation, you will end up with referrals. It's just part of the process. And I know that I often point coaches to that because I feel there's a lot we can do as coaches to help facilitate clients having a shift. And if we can't, then what are we in this profession for?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think there's a quote. I don't know who said it. I've never seen who said it, but it's something to the effect of, a farmer doesn't grow crops. A farmer creates an environment in which crops can grow. Right? So, a farmer puts a seed in the ground. He doesn't have any control over whether that seed grows, but he can create an environment that allows that to happen, and more times than not. And to me, that's what I'm looking for as a coach. Am I providing the space? Am I providing the environment, so to speak? And where's that coming from? Well, my listening, maybe my questions, I don't know, whatever's there, whatever I'm guided, when I'm more inspired in that moment to do in that moment, is that opening something up? Is that creating a space for that person to see something for themselves? And to me, that's my job as a coach. And I think that's what takes skill.
So,
I think it takes a lot of skill.
Let's just move to a kind of different tack now. You've been coaching, like you said, for over 25 years. What are some of the mistakes that you made that you might be willing to share with us, and help some of us avoid some of the same mistakes that you might have gone through?
Ankush, I was really trying to look good here. You're not going to let me do that, huh? And I don't know if we have enough time to talk about all the mistakes I made. One of the ones I've discovered more recently over the last year and a half or so is, how do I say it? Like thinking about the next session with someone and planning the next session out. Like, oh, we're going to talk about this, and, based on the last session. And forgetting that life happened between sessions, and that the person I'm coaching is not the same person that they were last session. So by the time I'm at the next session, if I'm, planning that out or trying to, I'm the one stuck in the past, and oftentimes, it would stunt things, it would be more of a barrier than it was a help. And again, I'm not saying absolutes here, but I really found that it was my thinking that it should have gone differently that last session should have gone differently. So now I'm going to, do X, Y, and Z in the next session. And in reality, the session went the way it went. And I can't tell you how many times I've been surprised by people who, even a session that I didn't think was that great, the person comes back and says, oh my God, let me tell you what's happened and how many things opened up out of that. So you just can't you can't trust your assessor, that internal assessment and critic that you have, you just can't trust it, So that was one thing is, I guess that's two things. Is not over preparing or thinking that I know what the next session should be.
Can I just say I love that about over preparing, but also I love it around being a critic about how the session went, because I remember when I first started coaching, I would really be critical of my own coaching, and I've realized over time I have no idea how a client is hearing it, and I've had sessions where I've thought that was terrible. This client's going to come back and say they want their money back, and that was really unhelpful. But it's been perfect for the client to come back, and that was so helpful. That really shifted something for me. And on the other hand, I've had sessions where I've thought, oh yeah, that I smacked that out of the park. And then in the future, the client can, you know what, I didn't really like that previous session, but this one's much better. And I'm like, oh, okay, I thought that was really good. So
That's to me a number of times as well, is that you don't know. And if your attention's on that, because to me, it's like if I have my attention on how am I doing or how did I do, it's just the wrong place. It's irrelevant. Who's the I anyway? Just my ego curious or, wanting to try to solve a future problem or something. It's just not important. And I think that's the other thing is that when I'm present and when my thinking and I'm with a person and whatever comes through, try to take credit for that, or I don't know, pat myself on the back about it or something like that is as big a waste of time as criticizing. Because, I never know what I'm going to say next. I don't know what I'm going to say next now, So I'm just hoping it helps people, and I guess the other thing, this is a big learning that I got from working with Steve Chandler, that there were so many things, as you know, in working with Steve Chandler that changed my life and changed my practice. But one of the big things was that I didn't need credibility or worthiness or any of the things I thought were necessary to get hired. That those were just not anything that was important to the person in front of me to help me. And my honest answer was, I don't know, but let's see if I can. And that changed everything for me, because I didn't have to spend any time in my sessions with people talking about, how great I was, or how, what critic I had, or who I worked with last week, or any of those things. It's
Sorry, we lost you for a second, but I think you're back. You said people don't care about
my credentials or who I worked with last week. They just want to know, can I help them? And when I authentically said, I don't know, but let's try. I'm willing to try. I'm willing to, discover some things together. It changed everything, because it stopped being about me. And up until that point, it was embarrassing how much my coaching was about me.
Thank you. That again is such a great point about taking us out of the equation. And I remember when Steve and I did our event in London in 2016, we talked about be a bad coach, right? Like the power of bad coaching. and how, and I often talk to coaches, especially coaches who are coaching from this understanding that this is so powerful and so revolutionary that, you know, if the only thing that people take away from your sessions is how, you know, a glimpse of how the world works, that's often massive, right? Like,
Yeah.
to me, when I and I know this isn't the same for everyone, but to me, when I got a glimpse into how my mind really worked, I mean, it was huge. Really, really, I sound like Donald Trump, huge, right? It was, you know, the biggest ever thing. It was the greatest, right? Right? But it was like, it changed how I showed up with my family. It changed how I showed up with my clients. Oh, sorry, not my clients. With my in my work clients. I was going to say, in my job, with my colleagues. I mean, just everywhere in my life. It was so big, and that was right at the beginning. And there was
Yeah.
so much more to come afterwards. But even at that first stage, and I'm sure there's so many coaches in here who've all got wonderful examples of having, you know, a few coaching sessions with people and the impact it's had. And I remember having a 20-minute coaching conversation with a client, really short conversation, and he read, because I bought it for him, he read a copy of Somebody Should Have Told Us by Jack Pransky, and the next session he said, "Oh, I've stopped smoking, by the way." Right? Now, it doesn't always happen like that, but
No.
you know, like you say, that it's when we get us out of the way that, and just open up something for the client to see, it can be just incredibly remarkable.
Yeah. And that was too, I learned that from Steve too, because, you know, if you read any of Steve Chandler's books, he tells you, you know, from the outset, how he, you know, was a failure as a coach, and, you know, his background and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, it attracts me to him, you know, because I see, wow, he's this human being and he seems to be, you know, doing well in life, and yet he's open with this stuff. And so it allowed me to let that, whatever facade I still had up, thinking that I needed to be a certain way as a coach, you know, and it just allowed me to relax and be with people. And people would say to me, you know, I've never had a conversation where I felt so connected to another person. And this was in an hour, you know, it wasn't like we spent a weekend together. And in less than an hour, people would say that to me. And I was like, that's what I'm about. You know, I want people to have that experience, because then they know that that's possible, and then what they can go connect with other people, or whatever happens, you know, whatever they, you know, whatever their life, how it unfolds. But, you know, stop trying to pretend to be something, you know, or that there's any pretense, you know, it's just not necessary. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things I got, from understanding, or beginning to understand, the principles is, you know, there's no place to get to ever, you know. Can I tell a funny story about you back when?
It has to be funny.
Well, you look good in it, okay?
Okay. Then you can tell the story, then it's okay.
When I think it was when I first, either I hadn't fully read the book, Mara's book, but it was very early around that time. And you and I had one of our calls, and I said to you, I said, I don't know if it's because I've been doing this work for so long. I said, but I know what it was. I had read an article about the principles. I hadn't read Mara's book yet. And I don't remember what article it was, but I was telling you about it. And I said, I don't know what the big deal is. I said, I feel like I just really understand the principles. Maybe it's because I've been around, you know, transformation for so long. And you said to me, you know, in your incredibly generous way, you go, do you mind if I share something with you? And I said, of course, Kush, whatever. And you said, whenever I hear someone say they understand the principles, I pretty much know they're full of it. And at the time I was like, what? You know, how dare you? I didn't say this to you, but over here I'm like, I've been a coach for all these years. How dare you? And because of our relationship, I went, okay. I said, I'm going to look again. And then I read Mara's book, and you recommended a couple of others, and I was like, holy crap, I don't know anything about anything. It just really allowed me to see that how full of it I was, but you don't know you're full of it until you see you're full of it, you know?
Yeah, and that is funny, because that was me too. Like, I remember before I started training with the three principles, I really didn't know anything, and I had read. So Jamie Smart had written this ebook, which later became Clarity, but it was called Effortless Evolution or something, and I'd read half of it, and I can't remember what I read, but I was like, oh yeah, it made sense, and my head was really spinning beforehand, and it just calmed me down. And then I heard Jamie speak at an event. And again, I'd be like, I've been around personal development for 10, 11 years. So he's speaking. And because I've read half of his book, I thought I knew what he was talking about. So I was like, yeah. What Jamie's trying to say is, and I said stuff. And Jamie very generously at the front of the room went, yeah, that's not it. That's not what I'm saying. And I'm like, really? Really? And, but I was like, okay, but I still didn't get how little I knew until like months later, and I signed up for the training. I was like, oh, this what? This is not what I thought I signed up for.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I mean, from, I want to say August, September, until I did Super Coach in January, I was kind of like, okay, I'm learning. And then, by noon on the first day of Super Coach Academy, I was like, what happened? And then I was just all in, because I realized how much I didn't even, I just didn't even see. So, yeah. So I think, and we take ourselves so seriously as coaches, like we get so significant, and so it's all so serious, and it just isn't. It's just not. You can take yourself lightly, and you can enjoy it and relax and, have some fun.
So we've got about 10 minutes or so, maybe just over 10 minutes. If you've got a question for Lisa or myself, like I said, please do ask. I say this every time, and we'll get 3 questions at 5 minutes to the end, and we won't be able to answer them all. So if you do have any questions for Lisa or myself, please do ask. Like I said, Lisa's got a wealth of experience, both in transitioning to her coaching practice of principles, but also doing very well in terms of her business, working with a real variety of clients, especially business clients. I know I've got tons of questions for you that we could keep going for another hour, but I really want to make this interactive for the group, and have you guys ask any questions that you have got. And if you want to remain anonymous, just say someone wanted to, just say my friend's asking, and we'll try and answer the question as well.
But let me just say that I would say when people ask me what I do, I almost always say I'm a business coach. Virtually all my clients come to me in the, for business reasons. And so it's not that I don't consider myself a life coach. It's just that's not the area of focus of my practice. It's almost, I can't think of the last person that I worked with that was for something other than business. It's probably been a good year since I did that.
And let's explore this. So typically, what would your clients come to you for in terms of business, or, how do they find you?
I would say, well, it varies. A lot of times it has to do with people wanting to expand their business. Right now, usually every year I take on one small business and I work with the whole business for a year. The person that I worked with last year, they opened a second location, and the second location, they had some business. There were 3 business partners, and before he had been a sole proprietor. So there was a big transition, and then they asked me to work with them again, which of course I said yes, because I love working with them. So in that case, it was it's working with the business owner to expand his leadership, but then also how do you create partnerships? How do you get the staff on board with understanding what's happening, and just really creating an environment where everybody can thrive, and be their best. And that's a very typical kind of thing that I work with people on, whether I'm working with the whole company or just the individual. It's, what's your impact? How do you expand your capacity to impact others? And it's all through understanding, you're limiting yourself, and, understanding how the mind works and how life works, and helping people to kind of see where they're up against their own thinking. So I just started working with somebody 2 weeks ago. She's a VP of a fairly large statewide organization, and here in New York, and she just saw that she was not handling her new boss well, and so she hired me. She had I spoke at a conference last fall, and so she hired me from seeing me speak, and then so those kinds of things. The cool thing is they hire me because of business reasons, and then of course it impacts their life all the way around, right? So I met with her yesterday, and she's telling me how much better her relationship with her mother is. We've never even talked about her mother, so and that's kind of the ripple effect of it all. But all things like that, growing businesses, expanding.
There's so much more I wanted to ask you, but Trevor's got a great question. Clients always say at the end, okay, so what do I do? I often say there's nothing to do, but there is something to see. And then we discuss, how do you handle the usual, okay, got it, so what do I do next? I mean, from a 3P perspective, deepening, not a coaching perspective, accountability.
That's a great question, Trevor. I do get that question a lot. Sometimes I invite people to think about, like, well, what do they think they should do now that they've seen things differently? What do they see there is to do? And I also encourage people to not project out into the future. I was working with a woman this morning, and she had said something similar. Like, she had this insight, she saw something for herself, and then she started asking me, well, what do I do the next time XYZ happens? And I said, well, number one, we don't know if XYZ is going to happen again. And number two, I don't know. But now that you've had this insight, what do you see? And so then she could see that nothing was going to be the same now that she had this insight. So I think sometimes just asking them to look and to see, what do they see now? And then I encourage them to be responsive to the moment versus planning it out. You got to just like gravity's going to be there, when you leave, it's always there, right? It's going to be there. It's a given. To begin to relate to knowing what to do in the moment is going to be there for you. It always is, as long as you're open to seeing it.
Yeah, I love that. When I have a client who says, so what do I do? That tells me I haven't explained things very well. And I go, okay, well, let's kind of go back through this. And I loved your answers. I'm just reminded of a client that I spoke to this morning who was like, okay, so tell me what to do. And again, it was and it wasn't at the end of the conversation, but it was a real good reminder to me that, okay, I haven't explained myself well. And for me, what I'm finding myself doing right now is talking about implications. I mean, my book my book's coming out soon. But my book is all about implications.
Very subtle.
Very subtle, I know. Right? I had a few minutes to get that in there. But my book's all about implications, because that's one of the things that I found my clients didn't get. So I'd recommend them to read other 3P books, and they'd come back and they go, yeah, I get it, right? But I would see like, oh, do you not see how this impacts relationships? You need not see how this impacts money? Do you not see how this impacts? And they wouldn't often get that. And
Yeah.
so I've been really talking about that with my client because so this morning, this guy, he was saying, well, what do I do? Do I follow this career, or do I follow this career, or do I follow a hybrid career? And I said, well, if what I'm pointing you to is true, what are the implications of that? And I want to get them to start thinking of implications. And he
Yeah.
started to say, well, and it's not always this quick, but he started to say, well, then it wouldn't matter what I did. And I went, right. And I kind of just waited, and he started to just let it unfold for himself.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's helpful, Trevor.
I like that implications. I think that's what, I didn't use that word, but that's kind of what I was pointing to, is now that you've seen what you've seen, what do you see? Right? Because I can answer that question from my perspective, what is there to do? But it's useless, because I'm not in that moment. I'm not in your skin bag. I don't know. So, but asking them to kind of see. But the other thing that popped into my head as you were talking is I think the question how tells us we need to slow down as coaches. We need to slow down when we hear, what do I do, or how, or anything like that. We need to slow down and just allow, new insight to come through. Cause I do think that something's off, possibly. But, we live in a world where everybody wants the 5 tips to flat abs, or, the 10 top tips to a great relationship. That's a habitual pattern of thought. So sometimes when someone asks that question, it's kind of a knee-jerk response. Like, oh, good, I got this. But, that fear of, I won't know what to do in the moment, is pointing them back to, like you said, what's the implication of what you've seen?
Yeah, versus what's the information that you need? Because you're right. Like, I love how you said everyone's looking for the 5 top tips. And again, I'm just reminded of the conversation I had earlier today. And it was like, I said to the client, and I stole this totally from Jamie Smart, so this is not mine. He once said to a group of us that if it was just about information, if it was just about telling the client what to do, because all you would need to tell someone who was looking to be healthier and slimmer is exercise more and stop eating so much crap. Thank you. Can you pay me, please? Right?
Probably $30,000.
Right?
Pounds, right?
It's not about, and that really hit home for me, that it's not about the information, because often people know what to do. And I sometimes say that to clients. I give that exact answer to clients. It's like, it's not about, what should you do next? What's the thing to do? You've got more information than you ever need.
Yeah. I when I'm giving speeches or workshops and I'm telling people what to expect, I say, if knowledge were enough, we'd all be thin and rich. Because there's so much knowledge on how to be thin and how to be rich. But look around. Knowledge is, insufficient. And so it's good to remember that, because that's what how means. They're looking for information and they don't need it. They really don't. But there's such a reliance on that. It's just a habit.
So we're pretty much out of time. This is really, really flown by. Like, this is unbelievable how quick the session has gone today. Are you willing to have people reach out to you if they watch this on the replay? Are you happy for them to ask any questions that you might have?
Absolutely. I really invite people to do that. Real quick, I'm playing a game as part of, I'm doing Michael Neal's Creating the Impossible program. And so I've created a project to help 1,000 people in 90 days. So if you're listening to this and there's something I can help you with, I really encourage you to reach out to me, because I'm out to help 1,000 people in 90 days. So
it would be easier if you did 90 people in 1,000 days.
Yes, and I'm woefully inadequate I think I'm at 50 or something like that. And I have about 45 days to go. So, if you're watching this, I can help you answer a question, or we could do a call or something. Please, please, please reach out to me. Do you want to just post my information, or do you want me to go ahead and?
Well, I believe you're in the group, so this has gone live in the group. So, are you happy for people just to contact you on Facebook, or how would you like them to contact you?
My preference would be email, which is Lisa at transformationalconversations.com. If you go to Lisa Giruzzi's Facebook page, that's my Facebook page, my business page, all my contact information is there. And I'll also put it in the comments once this is posted.
Excellent. And if you feel that you've been helped by Lisa already, please write in the comments, because that will help her increase the numbers. That'll count. It will count towards 1,000. So,
and it's all about the numbers.
Well, thank you so much for today, Lisa. I really appreciate that. I really enjoyed it. I know we could have carried on talking for another hour. I always enjoy talking to you, and I hope it was useful for people in the group. If it was, please let us know. Please let Lisa know. And I'll be back next month with another guest of mine talking about another topic relevant to coaching.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Thanks, Lisa.